Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting another project and it's going to be a palindrome checker. So what is a palindrome? A palindrome is a word that is spelled the same when you read it from the front and when you read it from the back. For example, Bob is a palindrome because B-O-B. Let's just create a new file to see everything. So we're going to call it palindrome.py. So as I said, for example, if we had Bob, so if you looked at Bob from left to right, it's Bob. And if you also looked at Bob from right to left, it is also Bob. So these type of words are called palindromes. So in this project, we're going to be creating a program that's going to check if a word is a palindrome or if it's not. So we're going to start by creating our plan. So what are the things that we need? First, we need to take an input from the user. So it's going to be the word that we're going to be checking. And once we have our word, we're going to create two variables or three variables. The first variable is going to be a number and it's going to be 0. So it's going to point to the first character of our string. We're also going to have a second variable, a second number that's going to point to the end of our list. And finally, we're going to have a third variable, which is going to be a boolean, either true or false. So it's going to be a variable called isPalindrome. So it's either going to be true or false. And using the two numbers that point to different parts of the string, we're going to have a while loop that's going to check if both values of the word that we were given is the same. So it might not make sense now, but when we write the code, it's going to make much more sense. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is take user input. So we're going to call it word. So we're going to create a variable called word and we're going to take input from the user. We're going to ask them to enter a word. We want the word to be a string, so there is no casting required here. So once we have our word variable, as I said, we're going to have two pointers, one at the beginning of the word and one at the end. So let's just call it I. So I is going to be 0. As we said with lists, as indexing starts with 0, the same is true for strings. So for a string, let's say for the string Abel, A is at position 0, B is at position 1, E is at position 2, L is at position 3. So it's the same as lists. So I equals 0 is going to point at the beginning of the word and J is going to point at the end. So how do we find the end of the word? We're going to use the len function that we used in our previous project. So we're going to say len of word, but len of word won't give us the correct value. Why is this? This is due to the indexing starting from 0. So again, let's look at a word example. So let's say we have the word example. Here, if we called len of word, we would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We would get 7. But the problem is we want J to point to the last character of our word. But the last character of our word is not at index 7, but at index 6. That is because when we count, we start counting from 1, but indexing starts from 0. We need to subtract 1 from the length of the word in order to get the correct index. So now we have two variables that point to the start and to the end of the word. And finally, we're going to have a variable called isPalindrome, which is either going to be true or false. So initially, we're just going to put it to true. So these are the three variables that we're going to need. And finally, we're going to look at the while loop. The while loop is probably the most complex part of this project, so listen closely. So we're going to have while, and the condition is going to be I less than J. So this might not make sense now, but we're going to look at it through an example. So we're going to have I less than J. Then if the word at index I, that means it's going to be one character. If that is not equal to the word at index j, then that means the word is not a palindrome. So we're going to set is_palindrome to false. And once we set it to false, we're going to be using a break statement. What does a break statement do? As soon as our code reaches a break statement, that means it's going to exit whatever loop it's in. So if we have break here, that means when a character is found to be different, it's going to set is_palindrome to false, and it's going to break our loop. So it's going to get out of our loop. So that is what we want to do. And the final step in our loop is going to be incrementing and decrementing two variables. So first we need to increment I by 1. Since it's starting from 0, and it's going to go through the word. And we're going to decrement j by 1. So we're going to use j minus equals 1. So let's see how this code would work. So again, let's go back to the example word. So here, what's going to happen, I is going to be 0 and j is going to be the length of the word minus 1. So j is going to be at e and I is also going to be at e. Since they are the same, the loop would continue. And in the next iteration, I would be at x and j would be at l, which means they are different. That means the word is not a palindrome. So when these two characters are not equal, is_palindrome is going to be set to false and we're going to break out of the loop. So that is what happens when the word is not a palindrome. So let's see another word that actually is a palindrome. So let's see Ababa. So this is a palindrome. So let's see how the loop deals with it. At first, I is going to be a and j is going to be a. So they're equal. So it goes to the next iteration. Then I would be at b and j would also be at b. So that is correct. So it's going to continue the loop. And in the next iteration, both I and j are going to be at e. But what does this mean? That means I is going to be equal to j. And that is going to violate our while condition. So our while condition is I is less than j. So when I and j are equal, that means our while condition is going to stop. And it stopped without getting into this if statement. That means it stopped without setting is_palindrome to false. That means is_palindrome is still true. That means the word given is going to be a palindrome. So now we can get rid of this example and we can actually see the code in action. But first we're going to print out different statements based on the value of is_palindrome. So we're going to have an if statement followed by is_palindrome. That means if is_palindrome is true, we're going to run this statement. We're going to print the word followed by the actual word, which is in the variable word is a palindrome. And we're going to have an else statement. That means if is_palindrome is false, we're going to print the word and we're going to substitute in word is not a palindrome. Again, we forgot f here. That means we need to convert the string to a formatted string. So now we can save our file and see if it works properly. So we're going to run our file using Python 3, followed by the name of our file, which is palindrome.py. So it asks us to enter a word. First, let's try a word that is not a palindrome. Let's put in our previous example word, which was example. As you can see, it prints out the word example is not a palindrome. Let's run our program again. And this time, let's put in an actual palindrome. Let's say Bob. As you can see, it prints the word Bob is a palindrome. And one last time, let's check if it works for Ababa. It prints out the word Ababa is a palindrome. So this is a simple implementation of a palindrome checker. For those of you that are interested, there is one way to reduce this code all the way up to one single line. So if you find that line, put it in the comments below and let me know. So this is all about the Palindrome project. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily programming videos.